Hare Rama. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Bhagavad-gita Ashtottara to the Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Bhagavad-gita Ashtottara to the Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavin Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Okay. On this 11th day of July 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 18, conclusion the perfection of renunciation, text number 50, on page 692. You have a different book? Oh, that's a different book. You know he's told from the thin margins. If the margins are thin, the pagination is different.
I can tell by the color.
Okay, text 50. Siddhim prapto yatha brahma tatapnoti nabodhame samasenaiva kaunteya nishta jnanasya yapara. Page 692, Jesse. Siddhim prapto yata brahma. Siddhim prapto yata brahma. Tatapnoti nabodhame. Samasenaiva kaunteya. Nishta jnanasya yapara. Siddhim prapto yata brahma. Tatapnoti nabodhame. Samasenaiva kaunteya. Nishta jnanasya yapara. Siddhim prapto yata brahma. Tatapnoti nabodhame. Samasenaiva kaunteya. Nishta jnanasya yapara. Siddhim prapto yata brahma. Tatapnoti nabodhame. Samasenaiva kaunteya. Nishta jnanasya yapara. Not yet. Okay. Word by word meanings. Siddhim, perfection. Praptaha, achieving. Yata, as. Brahma, the supreme. Tata, so. Apnoti, one achieves. Nibodha, try to understand. May, from me. Samasena, summarily. Eva, certainly. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti. Nishta, the stage. Jnanasya, of knowledge. Ya, which. Para, transcendental. O son of Kunti, learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection can attain to the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. Purport. The Lord describes for Arjuna how one can achieve the highest perfectional stage simply by being engaged in his occupational duty, performing that duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One attains the supreme stage of Brahman simply by renouncing the result of his work for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. That is the process of self-realization. The actual perfection of knowledge is in attaining pure Krishna consciousness. That is described in the following verses. Om Jnana Timanandasya Jnanandana Shalakya Chakshur Urmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Okay, so in this verse, Krishna says this perfection. So let's read the previous verse, what the translation is. One who is self-controlled and unattached and who disregards all material enjoyments can obtain, by practice of renunciation, the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. So, this is, of course, he's speaking about reaction to activities that we may perform. Prabhupada's famous fruit of action, meaning action whose motivation is to enjoy the fruit of the activity. So, inevitably, such action, even performed in any mode of nature, produces a reaction. What's going on?
I just saw something outside.
Oh,
That's odd.
okay. And we're bound by those reactions, like not just from this lifetime, from previous lifetimes. We have a whole record that brings us to the point we are now in this particular life. That's like a primary understanding of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. That's why Krishna begins his instruction with convincing Arjuna that he's not the body, that there's this eternal spirit soul, which is the real person, and that person cannot be killed. So right at the beginning, he's trying to distance Arjuna or convince him to give up his great anxiety that he's going to be the end of, he's going to kill his guru, he's going to kill his grandfather, Bhishma Dev, and all the friends and relatives. But actually, nobody's dying. They're just changing their dress. As he says, Vasangsi Jirnana Yata Vihaya. Just as at a certain point, I have the kurta is stained, it's torn, and said, okay, forget it, I need some new clothes, But then you get new clothes, but it's not the end of you. So similarly, this body, the gross and subtle body, Prabhupada compares the gross body, the physical body, to a coat, and the subtle body to a shirt. Because the shirt is always inside the coat. So the shirt comprises what we call the mind, intelligence, and false ego. And the senses that we have, the 9 senses, those are the coat. So the more important aspect is that subtle body, because that is a repository of your ideas, your aspirations, your fears. All of that resides in the subtle body, and it gives you a motivation to act in such a way with the gross body. If you're easily frightened, as soon as there's some danger or hint of danger, you'll try to run or try to, negate it somehow. If you're a courageous person, you want to try to do something about it, you stand up to it. And all of that character, all of those qualities are residing in the subtle body, and they're reflected in the gross body. So here Krishna is saying that one who is self-controlled and unattached, and who disregards all material enjoyments, that in itself is not an easy platform to come to. To be unattached is a great step on the path toward perfection, because it's those attachments. It's the attachments, and we should remember that the attachments have two sides. There's attraction and there's aversion, and both fall under the great rubric of attachment. One is a negative attachment; you're trying to avoid something, but they're both material. And there's a verse way back in the 2nd chapter. You may recall there's a wonderful two verses set where Krishna describes how by attraction to the objects of the senses to enjoy them, one follows a path of degradation. And it's something that we can all experience, and you can reflect. Dhyayato vishayan pungsa. Welcome. I was afraid you were going to make it. Sure, you had something important to do. So dhyayato, just like we have dhyana yoga, so becoming absorbed in vishaya, in the object of the senses, something that is enjoyable. I like to give the example of the advertising. Advertising is a science, built up to try to capture as much attention as possible and impart some material desire, which will, for a certain percentage of the people who it works on, will then buy the product because they associate the whole idea with something enjoyable like that. So this is all around us. So, but even before the science of advertising, it was still going on. Famously, Ajamil, the story of Ajamil at the beginning of the 6th canto, is very instructive. So the 5th canto, the end ends with this hair-raising description of hellish planets. I remember working on that. I helped put out the Bhagavatam back in '75. I felt I had hit the jackpot. Forget about the $200 million. That was the jackpot to be able to help put out the Srimad Bhagavatam for Srila Prabhupada. That's the way I felt. So I'm sitting there in my room, and I'm working on, absorb my mind in these chapters, because you have to in order to edit them, And all of these detailed punishments for someone who engages in illicit sex. You spend millions of years embracing a hot iron form of the opposite sex, Really? Okay, I mean, this is the Bhagavatam, you believe it. This one I always remember because I like to tell the story. And I grew up near New York City, and sometimes we would go into the city, and we never had enough money to go to one of those high-class restaurants, but we would sometimes go down Fifth Avenue and see them. And so some of them, I'll never forget this, they'd have a little aquarium in the window, in the window to the restaurant. And in that aquarium was this poor lobster. He's flopping around, and is it alive, And the whole idea, they didn't have to say anything. It says, this is how fresh your lobster will be. You pick your own lobster, and we'll drop him into the boiling water, and, there'll be a little, they don't feel anything, by the way. And so this hell, for those who do this with animals, then you get boiled in oil, for so many years, thousands of years. So, what is that? It's your subtle body. It's a subtle body. You're not dying. You get thrown off a cliff and your body is broken, but it's very painful, and then they can drag you up again and throw you down. So this is a description, and at the beginning of the sixth canto, Maharaj Parikshit is hearing this 7 days. He's not eating, he's not sleeping, he's listening 24 hours a day to Shukadeva Goswami tell him this. So, being a kind-hearted Vaishnava, he asked, well, how can one be relieved of this? How can one atone for these, so that the suffering won't take place? So, there's means of atonement. In other words, before you die, if you perform this sacrifice, this austerity, and worship this demigod, whatever, you can negate, the worst of it. But the problem is, as Maharaj Parikshit answers, because he's hanging a test from Shukadeva Goswami. And this will all end up in the glorification of the holy name, of chanting the holy name. And that is that, okay, that sounds okay, but it doesn't really negate the desire to perform the sin again. That's still in the heart, so you're still liable to get entangled in this. And this famous line, I forget how it begins, but Manye Kunjata Shochavat. Kunjata is a word means elephant. Shocha means a bath. An elephant gets all dusty and sweaty in the jungle, so he goes into a pond or a lake, and he takes a nice bath. He's got his own private, more portable shower head, and he's all clean. He comes out. Where's the gumsha? Where's the towel? How's he going to get dry? So he rolls around in the dust to get dry, so he's dirty again. The point is, in other words, you don't really make any progress that way. So then but he still wants to know, how can they be relieved? Then there's a whole story about this Brahman, Paka Brahman, who was, he wasn't like a pure Vaishnava, but he was Paka Brahman, who was out in the forest, gathering wood for his guru to perform sacrifice, and he sees this low-class couple embracing, having sex in the forest, and he loses it. He loses his composure. He loses his stability, and eventually he marries the prostitute who was there, and he loses all his Brahminical qualities, and he lives a whole life of sin, like that. But because he was raised as a Brahmin, he named at least his youngest son. He's 80 years old. He has a young son, so he named him Narayan. So when the Yamadutas come, this story, it's a very graphic story. They're coming, and it's very scary, frightening, And he's on his deathbed because he doesn't die, so he's on his deathbed. But they're ready to yank him out of his physical body and take him to Yamaraj for punishment and for one of those hells. And he cries out to his son, his young son, Narayan, Narayan. Now it's interesting that Prabhupada had originally, when he dictated the purport, he said 3 times. And he was reading in the class that he was giving. They were reading the manuscript. The book hadn't been printed yet, And so he said Narayan, 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 and Prabhupada said, "Does this say 3 times?" It says 3 times. Yeah, Prabhupada, once is enough. So he just the Sanskrit is just Narayan, So immediately the Vishnu Dutas came and stopped the Yamadutas. And then they have a whole talk, and the Vishnu Dutas are saying, you don't know the principles of religion. And the Yamadutas say, We thought that that Yamaraj was in charge of everything. Now, why are you stopping this man? Committed so many sins. They have a little. No. So they go to Yamaraj, and he explains the power of the holy name to eradicate sin. That's like the first installment. That's not the goal. That's the first installment. So back to our verses here. So here he says, one who is self-controlled and unattached. So this unattachment, this vairagya, is an essential element on the path back to Godhead. Because what are those ropes that keep us attached, that keep us coming back? The hridaya granthi, literally the ropes are knots in the heart. Those are these attachments that are formed over lifetimes that become activated when we come in contact with the objects of the senses. And they drag the mind, they keep the mind from remembering Krishna or being able to do sadhana, becomes. So those attachments, material attachments, need to be purified. They need to be eradicated or purified, just like attachment for food, Well, okay, everyone's attached to a good meal, Well, okay, come on, take prasadam, And Prabhupada, that was one of his genius, from the beginning. He was cooking for the people who visited him, and they would be all attracted, and they come back. Even if they didn't get into the philosophy so much, they come back and they get exposed, and they would chant, and in this way become purified. So this, back to what I was going to talk about, and that the progression of how the soul gets entangled in this world. Dhyayado vishayan pungsa. This is someone who has no exposure to Krishna consciousness. But he gets exposed to the objects of the senses. Vishaya means objects of sense. So dhyayato, if someone meditates on them, then he'll become attached, right? Dhyayado pungsa sangas teshu bhajayate. Sangha has two meanings. I always like to point this out. It means attachment, but it also means association, because one leads to the other. This is a principle of Sanskrit that I noticed. Like you have the word gati. Now gati normally means goal, but it also means it means the means of getting to the goal. And in both of the songs we sing in the morning, for those who are able to attend Mangalarti, both of the songs have that word in it, meeting the means. In the first, the Gurvashtaka, the first line goes, Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada. By getting the mercy of the acharya, the guru, you get the mercy of Krishna. Because the acharya, the spiritual master, is the representative of Krishna. He's not saying worship me. He says do this, and you'll please Krishna. So if you do that, he'll be pleased. Not that you're serving him, but that you serve. And so if you get the mercy of Krishna. But yasya prasada nagati kutopi. Without the mercy and the grace of the spiritual master, you're ignoring his orders basically, then there's no means of advancement. You can't get Krishna's mercy. That's what he says. Approach a spiritual master, my representative, surrender, ask questions, serve, and then you'll make progress. So, and the other song says, Shri Guru Charana Rati Aise Uttama Gati. This is a little more a step forward from what Krishna is describing there. And that is that Shri Guru Charana Rati Aise Uttama Gati. That the best means for the goal is attraction, affection for the lotus feet of the spiritual master. In other words, you can perform, and this is normally the case. You come and there's so many orders. The spiritual master isn't even there; he's a million miles away. But you know his orders. It's like in ISKCON, and so you say, "Okay, I'm going to follow." You're not following really out of affection. You're following because you know this is the right thing to do, and this is how it works. But ultimately, you're meant to feel the grace of the spiritual master and feel the gratitude. And when you start to experience the benefits of Krishna consciousness, how it's creating more peace in your heart, and you become attracted and whatever, then you say, oh, how fortunate I am to have come in contact with this, and all because of Srila Prabhupada's grace and his disciples, also the spiritual masters. So that affection, it's kind of a basis, the most important basis for service. When the service is done because you want to do it, Not because you should do it, but that they're mixed together. I should and I want to, which is the best combination. And why do you want to? Because this is what the superior wants. This is what he wants, and this will please him. And I know this will please Krishna, and ultimately I'll be, advancing Krishna consciousness. So that affection is an important element in Krishna consciousness. But what I want to emphasize is that the word gati, which is the goal, also means the means to the goal. And it comes up again, and I'll give this one last example. In the second chapter, there's an important verse. Nehapakramanashosti pratyavaya nubidyate swapamapasya satrayate mahato bayat. In this endeavor of Krishna consciousness, there's no loss or diminution. Whatever you can manage to do in this lifetime, you may not go the whole course and go back to Godhead, but you don't lose it, because it's something. It's spiritual. It's something that is an asset for your next life. In your next life, as Krishna promises, you'll be born in a wealthy family that's also pious, so you won't have to worry so much about making ends meet. You'll have time for devotional service, or even better, a family of devotees. We see these, two wonderful families. You got Purushottam and his wife. He cooks sometimes, and the little baby Gaurangi comes in, And she was born, I don't know if she's even 3 years old, 2 years old, maybe 1 year old. But what a fortunate birth, out of all the millions of 1-year-olds in the city, or 100,000, how many get a chance to see Krishna and the Artik and be in an environment like this? So that's the most auspicious birth. And Prabhupada would like to point out that's the family I was born into. That's what Bhaktisiddhanta was born into. The great Vaishnava. So the idea is that now in that verse it also says, "Swalpamapya sadharmasa trayate mahatobayat." Even a little advancement on this path, and it protects you from bhayat. Now bhaya is fear normally, but it also means danger. What causes fear? Danger. You see? So the thing that causes it also has the same word attached to it. And what that verse, and hopefully I'm going to be able to revise the translation, rather than protects you from the most dangerous type of fear, protects you from the most fearful type of danger. Because that's really what we're talking about. The danger is that you'll lose the human form of life if you're really super sinful in the modes of ignorance. So back to these two verses, and I'm going to explain. So he says, you think about you absorb your mind, or you get some advertisement and it implants a desire, you become attached to something or someone. And sangat sanjayate kama. And if you pursue that attachment and you let it grow, it becomes an overwhelming desire, kama. It doesn't have to be sex desire, it could be something else. But an overwhelming desire to engage in that with your senses, sense gratification. When that's frustrated, you become angry. If you can't express your anger, you become depressed. These are all psychological things. So, kama krodha vijay krodhat bhavati sammoha. If you act in pure anger, you could do something you regret for the rest of your life. Sammoha, you become completely bewildered or crazed by anger. It can become something. Sammoha smriti vibhrama, your memory is lost. You forget who you are, you forget your position, you forget all normal restraints. So, sammoha smriti vibhrama, smriti brangshad, when your memory is destroyed by this, smriti brangshad buddhina, your intelligence is destroyed and you're lost, you've fallen down into the material pool. So the next verse gives you how to counteract all this. And it says, raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayanidyaischadan atmavashay vidheyatma prasadam adhigacchati. How to get the prasadam? Not something to eat, but the grace of God. So, he starts out with raga dvesha. Raga means attachment, dvesha means aversion. They're opposites. The opposite of attachment is not detachment. Detachment is what we're looking for. And that means detachment from any aversion also, as well as attraction. So raga dvesha, vimukta, being liberated. Even as the senses are moving amongst their objects. In other words, you're not physically separated from these objects of senses. I like to remember Prabhupada walking up Broadway through Times Square, with some books in a little book bag, going to the bookstores trying to sell. I know at that time, it's changed now, but in that time, Times Square was, there's this degenerate movie theaters, all this stuff, and it was not a nice place to be. They Disneyfied it, in, I don't know, 25 years ago, but this is back in '65. So Prabhupada wasn't affected. Raga Devesha Vimuktais too. He wasn't attracted, he wasn't repelled. He's just chanting Hare Krishna and trying to spread the word, selling enough books so he could buy some rice, for that day. I mean, that's what he was doing. So he was a perfect example because at every moment he's tasting and remembering, tasting Krishna consciousness, remembering his relation with Krishna, and he's on that platform. These allurements they're not allurements for him. They're just symptoms of the degradation of the age that he's trying to counteract, as best he can, with his books. Starting the movement, and he had no people at that time, So, and the key is Atma Vashay Vedayatma, is that complete self-control by following the regulative principles of freedom. It's a wonderful, almost seems like an oxymoron, like a self-contradiction. Regular principles, you're regulated, and where's the freedom? You're free, you become free from the allurements and from the trap of material association and attachment. So that's the key. And so asakta buddhi sarvata, so the intelligence is not attracted, and I think we did 50. So attaining this perfection, this level of perfection, which is Naishkarmya Siddhim, the perfection of Naishkarmya, means acting in this world without any material desire. That's Naishkarmya. Means you're not getting any karma, good or bad. We always have to remember that if you're a very good person materially, you're very generous and you like to perform welfare work for people, which is good, but still that keeps you bound here. You get a birth in the next life where you'll be very comfortable, but you still have to die, And if you're in this material world without the protection of Krishna consciousness, then you can become degraded, become affected, and lose it. You're still vulnerable. But if you're building up your assets in Krishna consciousness, birth after birth, you're on your way back home, back to Godhead. So that's the difference. So asakta buddhi sarvatra. So siddhim prapto, attaining this perfection of detachment, which is what this chapter is all about, perfection of renunciation, And renunciation often includes this vairagya. It's not just renunciation because you're very attached to something and you renounce it. It's painful, but you're doing it. I know because it's good for me. But no, the superior kind of renunciation is that you don't care anymore. You renounce it because your attraction is to Krishna, and you've lost your attraction from Maya. This is the great blessing. This is what Krishna means in chapter 7, where he's talking again about the modes of nature. It's a theme throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Daivi yesha gunamayi, mama maya duratya. First line, he sets the premise. This divine energy of mind, composed of the three modes of nature and all that it entails, is my energy. That's why it's divine. I've created it. And it's very difficult to cross beyond on your own, meaning it's impossible. You can't just decide to be liberated. You've got all of these attachments and things. Daivi yesha gunamayi mama mayadu mameve papadyante mayame tangtanantide. But by surrendering unto me, one can easily cross beyond it. And the most important element of surrendering is to think of Krishna, is to become absorbed in thinking of Krishna. Because that will attract your mind away from Maya to Krishna, because he's more attractive. Maya is just a pale reflection of Krishna. Whatever she can attract us with is just originally with Krishna. But because we're averse to serving him, we'll get absorbed in these things. So that we can become free from the bondage of Maya, with these gunas also means ropes, the ropes of attachment, they get cut, and rather we become attached to Krishna. You have to be attached, and you have to try to enjoy. But real enjoyment, you find in Krishna consciousness, is dancing and chanting and serving Krishna. And that enjoyment is not bound by the material energy. It's not material, it's spiritual. And once you're able to experience it and relish it by cultivating this detachment and following the principles, yes, using your willpower, you realize you're at a different level. You're not ever morose, because you're carrying with you the reservoir of pleasure within your heart. And you can contact it any time by chanting Hare Krishna. It helps sometimes to read how the great acharyas experience the holy name, because we've been given that. That's free for everyone, But all of us are experiencing it, the chanting, in a different way, according to our, attachment or our purity. But it's available for everyone. So you read about Rupa Goswami chanting, and he's saying, Tunde tandavani ratim batanote tundavali labdaye karna kroda kadambani katayate karna buddhe bhakspiham chetak prangana sangini vijayate sarvendriyana kutim no jane janitaki yadvidamitai krishneti varnatvadi. Varnadvahi. He says, I don't know how much nectar these two syllables Krishna have produced. When I chant them, they seem to dance within my mouth. I want to have thousands of mouths and tongues in order to relish the sweetness of the name. And when they enter my ear holes, then I want to have millions of ears to relish those wonderful, blissful syllables. And when they enter the courtyard of the heart, all the senses become stunned and become inert and fixed on Krishna. And I don't know how much nectar. That's just one verse. And his brother, Sanatana Goswami, oh my God, in his Brihad Bhagavatamrita, near the very beginning, there's something called the Mangalacharana, which are a series of verses setting out the subject of the book, and often prayers and also blessings for the readers, So here in his Mangalacharana, he includes this verse describing how he's experiencing the holy name. Jayati Jayati Namananda Rupam Mararer Vinamita Nija Dharma Dhyana Pujadi Yatnam Katamapi Sakadatam Muktidam Praninam Yat Padamamamritamekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me. So he's saying, all glories to the holy name of Murari, Krishna, the enemy of the Muradim, which is Namananda Rupam, the very form of bliss. He's experiencing Nama Ananda Rupam Murari. Chanting that holy name inspires you to give up, to stop all efforts in material varnashram dharma, or meditating on the impersonal, or worshipping the demigods. He summarizes it: Vidamita nija dharma dhyana pujadi yatnam, adi yatnam. Efforts to in this the material side of the Vedic culture, the karma kanda, all those sacrifices going to heaven. You don't care anymore. So it induces this stuff. Katamabhisakadatam, even chanted once by a living entity, can give him full liberation if you chant purely, Sakadatam muktidam praninam padamamamritam ekam, it is my supreme and soul nectar. Ekam jivanam, my very life and my only ornament that I carry. Just in that one verse. That's a wonderful book, by the way, translated by my old friend Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu, who sadly passed away about 12 years ago. But he was very instrumental in bringing out the remaining chapters of the Bhagavatam. The 77 chapters of the 10th canto that Prabhupada didn't get to translate, the 32 chapters of the 11th canto, and the 13 chapters of the 12th canto. A lot of chapters. And he worked with Ridhananda Maharaj. I had a small role to play as the editor. But he translated all these commentaries, so that the purports could be nice. So he translated this book, the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which was the first book written by the Goswamis. And Srila Prabhupada says in the purport in Adi Leela, I'm not sure what verse, that if one wants to understand Krishna consciousness, one should read this book, the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. It is now published by the BBT in this wonderful translation, edited very skillfully by Jayaveda Swami. Brihad Bhagavatamrita. B-R-H-A-D, I think. Bhagavatamrita. Bhagavatamrita. Okay, any questions on only this? I may have been getting a little far afield, but I think this is what he's working up now toward the final, verses, and they're all very important verses. Sure, Prabhu.
Mic check. So you mentioned a term that I don't think I've heard before. You were referring to a story about, I think the term that you said was Bhakta Brahmana, but I'm not, you said he wasn't like a full-fledged devotee.
Yes, a Jamil, yeah.
Okay, what was that term, and what does it mean that you used?
I wouldn't use the term Bhakta Brahman. Pakka Brahman.
Pakka Brahman.
Yeah, this is a word that it used to be very common. It's something Prabhupada introduced us to. And it means basically first class, very first class, you know.
Gotcha, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think Bengali, maybe Hindi, I'm not sure.
Okay. And then you mentioned the Yamadutas, so what was this term again? That's Bayat? What does this mean again?
What was it again?
Bayat, you mentioned?
Yeah, that's at the end of this verse. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Now that's a version of the word bhaya, which simply means fear. Bhajahore mana srinandanandana abhaya charanara vindure. Prabhupada's name, he was given the name Abhay Charan, which means fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna. You see, and when his initiated name also just expanded it. Abhay, that's the AC in AC Bhaktivedanta. Abhay Charanara Vinda. You know,
okay.
At the lotus feet, that gives you fearlessness, and you can do what Prabhupada did.
Okay.
But the way I get off onto that is that in that verse, swalpa means very little advancement on this path can protect you from the greatest danger. And Prabhupada would quote this verse quite often, and he would always explain it that way. He may not use the same word, greatest danger, but great danger or whatever. Always the danger. But the word is bayat, which is a variation of it grammatically. Because danger brings fear, you see? And so it's that theme of that, in Sanskrit, that a same word will be used for the cause of something and the result. But Prabhupada, in his dictation or typing, I think he was typing at that point, it came out that most dangerous type of fear, and I always wondered about, how is fear dangerous, because it got a little bit mixed up, and we're trying to unmix it, because really it is the most fearful kind of danger. Fearful can mean something that causes fear. That's the peculiarity of the English language. It also means you're full of fear, but it can mean something that makes you full of fear. So that's the most fearful type of danger is not just to be reborn, but to die and lose your human form of life. Sent down into the species, there's no hope of relief, and come back up. So that will protect you. A little advancement on Krishna consciousness. You get a human form of life. That's the greatest thing.
And then the last question that I had, or comment or something, was this concept of not being able to make spiritual progression without initiation from a bona fide guru. Now, I've asked this about this a few times because within my journey of Krishna consciousness, I've come into contact obviously with some of the Gaudiya monks, and they are very almost, pushy. Adamant. There you go. Adamant's a better word. Adamant, and very, about hastily, initiating young aspirants. But just curious, what your idea is. Is there a way for somebody that's not initiated, or I'm not initiated. Am I still making a teeny weeny bit of progress, or am I just completely a lost cause?
It's not that you can't make any progress without being initiated, because what is progress? I mean, if you can experience it. In other words, if you find yourself being attracted to Krishna, wanting to chant, you're chanting, you may be chanting 16 rounds, I don't know. That's progress, But it's kind of like confirmation. I mean, in the Catholics that get confirmed. I know in the Jews, it's like bar mitzvah, It's a little different. But the idea is that, okay, you recognize, you're serious, you're on the path, and there's some very important things happen because you take vows before the fire, before the deities, before the devotees, and it's a commitment. And Krishna he describes, if you really want to understand, tadvidi paripatena paripashnena sevya, that it's a very important step, but it doesn't mean that you can't take steps up to that step. Because, Prabhupada's movement, there's so many devotees and so many bhaktas, and bhaktas, it's not that they're not making any advancement, they're definitely making advancement. If they're serious, they'll be, giving up the four sins, following the principles, chanting 16 rounds. I was living in the temple a whole year before I got initiated, almost a year. And finally I asked the temple president, hey, how does one get initiated around here, He said, oh, okay, you want to get on the list? Yeah, please put me on the list. But I felt that I had made some advances, but I wanted to really get confirmed and get serious. So that it's not like that. But it is a very essential step if you really want to, if you have some idea. Okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. Try to go back to God in this one lifetime. Then it's essential to do that, to take that step. But the thing is, Prabhupada brings this up in the books. There's something called purascharya, which traditionally means qualifications that you have to meet in order to perform a sacrifice, or in this case, to get initiated. Purascharya. Now, for chanting Hare Krishna, there's no purascharya. Anyone in any state of mind, from any background, can chant Hare Krishna. That's a great boon. That's Lord Chaitanya. That's a great mercy. Anyone can enter into the house of bhakti. But in order to progress steadily and for bestly, then it's important to perform these other things. And Prabhupada, I remember reading this recently, how he was explaining to some reporter, it was all the time, how does one get recognized in your movement, something like that. I forget what he's saying. So, well, we don't just initiate anybody. They have to have this, you didn't call it purascharya, but they have preliminary qualifications, and give up these things and regularly follow, the four regular principles, and chant 16 rounds a day. And then at a certain point, after 6 months, he had 6 months, then if they want to, they can be initiated, So that this giving initiation out freely kind of cheapens it, and I'm was completely familiar with that. We went through that whole thing, but it was like it smacks of kind of just trying to increase the numbers, for I don't know when I say material reasons, but it's not proper, to do that. And Prabhupada wouldn't do that. He said once, if I didn't have these four regular principles, if I said, because that's what the other yogis, they didn't have that. Just come here, do your asanas, and then you pay me a fee, and I'll give you the mantra, like that. It said, no, you can't do this. You can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't, gamble and all that. So Prabhupada never gave in on that. And he said, I could have 1 million followers if I did that. But he didn't want to cheapen it that way. And so instead, he had many followers, sincere followers, who were ready to sacrifice their lives.
Thank you. And one more thing, going back to the Yamadutas, if you have the patience for one more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Until we run out of time.
There's a lot of, yeah. So is this concept of, the Yamadutas' duties being, interrupted by the Vishnu-dutas, is this related to, the concept of the Tulsi beads and the tilak, protecting us? Is this related to the concept that we, as practitioners of Krishna consciousness, we're not going to degrade to like you were mentioning, we're not going to lose the progress that we made in this lifetime.
Yeah, totally.
Is that related to that?
Totally.
Okay.
Even Yamaraj, you read the 6th canto, it's very dramatic, the whole thing. And he says, whatever you do, he's talking to his dudes, his servants, fierce, He says, don't approach anyone who's chanting Hare Krishna, And there's other things, the Tulsi beads and all these signs. In other words, don't get me in trouble with Vishnu, by scaring his devotees, So that's part of what it means that, to be protected from the greatest, well, I guess in that case it is the greatest fear, You know, because, I mean, this is something I never experienced. I worked in the hospital, but I've also kept up with it, you know, and that there's something called terminal restlessness, where someone's going to die, and, you know, they start freaking out, you know, they see dogs, this and that. They're starting to see, so of course we sedate them, you know, which is the worst thing. You want to be in full consciousness when you leave your body and you're chanting Hare Krishna. But it's a thing, you know, it's that people see that, and it's and the whole thing with a coma, you know, that's the worst thing. You're just lying there, but inside what's happening in your brain, what are you going through, you know? It can, weeks and months. So that's the greatest danger, which you get relief from by even a little advancement, you know. But we want to go for a lot of advancement. Let's you know, go for broke, so you can go back to Godhead. You know, chant purely. Okay. All right, we have 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, so I've gotten into this habit of giving a poem. I hope it's okay. Okay. So, you've probably heard this many times, but I don't think they've heard it so much. So. One of my old favorites. And this is, you know, it's almost like it's a stage that everyone has to go through, but this expresses it in a very dramatic way and very poetic way. This is a verse that Lord Chaitanya spoke to Sanatana Goswami in, I think, the 20th or 21st chapter of the Madhya Lila. He's beginning to describe the process of devotional service as opposed to the philosophy undergirding it, the sambandha. You know, who are we? We're souls, and there's God, and there's this world. What's the relationship? And we're all eternal servants of Krishna. Okay, I want to practice devotional service. Then the second one is abhideya, the actual practice. So this begins that chapter. And he says, Kamadinang katina katita parita durni deshas. Tesham jata mayina karuna natupano prashantihi utsvid jaitanati yatupate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayatak sharanamabhahyam mam niyung svatmadasye. In how many ways have I sought to, so he's reviewing his life, in how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. I think that's very appropriate to this verse, getting free of fear in the Amadutas. All right, we will pursue our exploration of the latter part of the 18th chapter tomorrow with text 51 to 53. Hare Krishna. And I think tomorrow also I think they're going to bring the recorder, and we're going to do some recording of these poems with my friends Jugal Kishore and Brajamandala. Huh? Yeah, he mentioned that. Yeah, I saw him, I think, this morning.
Oh, yeah, this morning. It's always pretty close.
Hare Krishna. Well, thanks for hanging around, Krish. I don't know what your business is. You got a job here or what?
We're figuring it out.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.